Well, good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jack Miner. I am past president of ACRO, and I'm also the director of SEM. And a little bit about what we're doing today is really giving all of you a chance to think a little bit more and hear a little bit more about all of the opportunities for registrars specifically to not get left behind in the enrollment management world and to find their own place, both in a professional standpoint and also in a career advancement standpoint, and how hopefully the upcoming SEM meeting can play a role in that for you. A couple of housekeeping things, then we'll do some quick intros. Some housekeeping things first, this is being recorded, so don't say anything that you wouldn't want as part of that recording, as always. The other piece is we're doing this in a little bit different format than we've done some other webinars. So this is really more like a meeting open format. So you are free to unmute and mute yourself. We will be using the full chat capabilities. So when you're chatting, when you're putting comments in the chat, when you're putting questions in the chat, it will be viewable for everybody, not just the presenters. And if there's any other things that you need, don't hesitate to reach out. Zoom doesn't have the hand raise feature, but absolutely, if you put your camera on and wave your hands, we'll be sure to stop and identify you. This is absolutely an opportunity where we have some prepared questions for the panelists, but more than anything, it's an opportunity for you to feel like you're getting an opportunity to ask questions as well. So I'm going to ask the panelists, and I'll do the same, to give a little bit about what our current roles are, and then talk a little bit about our institution, and then we're actually going to come back and talk about how we got to where we are. So first, my day job is I'm Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at University of Cincinnati. We're a school that is just over 50,000 students. We're about 51,000 students right now. We've had pretty significant growth in the last few years from an enrollment standpoint. We grew 3,000 students this fall, just as an example, and so have a pretty aggressive enrollment strategy. So, and I've been in the role for about 4 years, and I've been in enrollment management as a profession for 25 years. So with that, Brenda.
I'm Brenda Selman. My current day job is Assistant Vice Provost for Enrollment Management and University Registrar at the University of Missouri. And we're the flagship right in the middle of the state. If you've never been here, just right there. We enroll about 30,000 students a year. I'm also serving on the ACRO board as the Vice President for Admissions and Enrollment Management.
Thanks. Tammy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tammy Agard. I am currently a senior consultant with ACRO Consulting. So I have shifted from being a practitioner and into the consulting arm of ACRO, and hoping to continue to give back to the profession that I love and help institutions on various topics. And so this has been an interesting shift for me. I've been doing this for about 2 years now, almost 2 years. And prior to that, I've got, as Jack said, over 25 years of experience in enrollment management.
And Maria.
In my current day job, I'm the Associate Vice President of Academic Services and Registrar at Cal Lutheran. We have about 4,000 students, so we're like at the polar opposite of the rest of the other panelists. I've been doing this for 30 some odd years, so a long time. I've been at Cal Lutheran about 23 years as registrar.
So the first question is really to dig into that a little bit more. So if folks can kind of talk about what their journey was, what was the professional journey that got them to the role that they're in now? And I'll actually start back with Tammy, having had a little bit of a different path than some others and in different places geographically. I'm not too far from where I grew up, but Tammy's moved around a bit more. So Tammy.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. So I actually started my career at the University of Wyoming I was an advisor, and then went on to work in admissions as a transfer evaluator. So I started kind of in the admission side, and then went away with my husband to well, he followed his career and education path that led us to Washington State University, where I spent some time working in the athletic department. So I saw the university from a different side there. When we came back to Wyoming, I worked a little bit in the graduate school and then landed solidly in the registrar's office. Worked in the registrar's office, worked my way up. I worked there for about 16 years. And the last 2 of that, I was also interim director of financial aid. And then once I had done what I could, I guess, at the University of Wyoming, I was looking to broaden into enrollment management. I then became the associate vice president for enrollment management at the University of Florida. And I was there for about 9.5 years and had admissions, financial aid, UF Online Enrollment Services, did a huge implementation. So that's kind of my career path. I left UF in November of 21, and I've been doing consulting since then. So that's me. I mean, it's definitely a broad experience in all the pillars that are in traditionally in enrollment management.
So Maria, let's hear about your journey.
Yeah, so I've actually always worked in a registrar's office. I was as a senior, some of you will appreciate this, graduating as a senior ages ago, and realized what I thought I wanted to do with my life was absolutely not what I wanted to do with my life. And I was a student worker in the registrar's office, and they had a 6-month temporary job that they offered to me, and I thought, I'll take it. I'm not going to like it. I won't be tempted to stay. It'll give me a chance to figure out what I want to do with my life. And then I ended up working into another job in the office, and I helped my first student on the phone, someone who was in the military, and spent 2 hours helping him figure out how he was going to get finished and graduated. And I hung up the phone and I thought, I can't believe they're going to pay me to do this. It was just absolutely the best thing I have ever experienced in my life. And so much so I still remember. He never remembered me, but he graduated 2 years later, and I thought, yeah, this is it. And I have done every single job there is to do in the registrar's office. I was at Chapman before I came here. And I have other pieces and have had other pieces of the enrollment management thing, more what happens after they're here. So I have disability support services. I've had student success and advising underneath me also. And as many as I think 6 different grant programs at one time or another.
Great. And Brenda.
So like a little bit like Maria, I wasn't entirely sure what I was doing with my life. So I went to grad school, and then wound up working in admissions at the University of Kansas. Any of you who know, between Kansas and Missouri, they're still fighting a rivalry. So it was difficult somewhat to come over here, but I had several years in admissions, and then I moved literally across the hall and started working in the registrar's office and worked up to associate registrar. Then I was pretty sure, oh, I got a shout out. Yeah, go Jayhawks. Yeah, I'm wearing the Jayhawk colors and I've got my Mizzou, so I'm covered today. So then I could tell that my boss wasn't really going to be going anywhere. He'd made that perfectly clear. But I kind of liked the registrar work a lot. It fit my personality of helping people, but also, being able to fix things. So I applied for and got to come to the University of Missouri, where I've been the registrar initially. And then we were implementing, some of you may recall, Y2K. and implementing PeopleSoft. And I thought I had run away from that. That was KU's counter offer to get me to stay, was to implement. And I'm like, I'm not going to implement anything, only to come over and find myself in charge of 4 University of Missouri campuses implementing it. So I worked for System, and I kept my job as the registrar because I thought that was key. I did not want to give up that responsibility and that tie into students. And so once the system was up, I politely backed out of that, only to have them come ask me again to play 2 roles for a while. But it really gave me a great feel for the whole of enrollment management, because the second time I was working on student success initiatives and trying to coordinate with all 4 campuses for us to think about what were our priorities as 4 very different institutions, but how could we implement software and leverage that and work together in a way that then fit our different populations, and found that very helpful. So when I moved out of working for System, I went back to being registrar, and then also got involved with the enrollment management here on the Mizzou campus. So I have the student information systems reports to me, as well as the Student Veteran Center. And many years ago, when I was an undergrad and a grad, I worked in Res Life and in the Women's Center. So I've had some of that student affairs kind of thing to continue to draw on. And so I think all of that has really helped me as I've moved along in enrollment management.
So part of the reason I started with that question, and part of the reason really that we put this workshop together, was to really talk more about the path for folks from a registrar role in really getting exposure to enrollment management. I think many of you know that my background was I had worked in higher ed for probably 35 years, but had done enrollment management, specifically in the University Registrars office, for about 20 or 25 years. Again, very similar, working for a boss that wasn't going to go anywhere, but I still stuck it out. And one of the things that, as ACRO has done research, one of the things that they found is it's a very, very small population of registrars that move into the senior enrollment manager role. It's literally less than 5% of the folks in the field in that senior enrollment management role identified that they had moved there from a registrar job, and it's almost always at your home institution. It's very rare that you would jump institutions to make that leap. So one of the things that I wanted to drop in the chat for everybody is a resource, because the information is out there now, and then you should also expect a new version to come out very soon. Is Wendy Kilgore annually does, if you aren't familiar with this, Wendy Kilgore annually or biannually does a survey of various senior professions. So the senior admissions officer, senior enrollment manager, to really get information about what's within their scope, what did they see as their career trajectory, and how did they get to where they are, but also some information about where they're going. And that's one of the things that within ACRO we used a couple of years ago to really identify things like we were going to have a large number of vacancies within the university registrar role, as a number of us we're at the point in our lives where we are either going to be retiring or moving on to something else in a few years. So that survey does a really good job of letting you think about what are the opportunities available, what's the pathways, what are the skills and competencies that you need to learn. So that's out there from the last time. But again, Wendy Kilgore just did that request for an update in the last week or two. So there should be a new version of that coming out in the next weeks to a month. So kind of the next question for all of you is really kind of building on that. So, you know, in your current role, in your past roles, what are the ways that you've used the registrar background to really start to carve out a place for yourself and really influence enrollment management at your institution? So anybody that wants to jump in first between the three.
I guess I'll go first. I know my data cold. If there's data to know about student success and what's happening with the student, I know it and can quote it without looking at the numbers. It helps a lot because it turns out most people at your institutions don't know what's happening. And there is a power to knowing what the data is and what it says. and then being able to speak to it and bring that down to an operational, here's, now that we know X, we can do Y. But I make sure I always know my data. People come to me for data now, even though I'm not responsible for institutional research. That helps a lot. And I've used that a lot for leverage in my position. The other thing is I do a lot of quiet diplomacy. I work with a lot of faculty. I do a lot of quiet diplomacy, and I, generally speaking, always say yes when someone asks me to be on a committee. Would you go to this meeting? Would you help with this? I generally speaking always say yes, because you can't get your foot in the door if you're not willing to take the first step to be there. And part of that is saying yes when someone asks you to do something, even if I sometimes overcommit myself a little.
I was going to say something kind of builds on that, and that great segue, Maria, is I've had the good fortune while I've been at Missouri to have a very seasoned team that keep the wheels on the bus. And so that has given me the opportunity to really work on policies and processes. So like you say, we know the data and the information, we know what's happening with students, and we know where all those blockades, barriers, narrowing points are. And so in taking that then back out to faculty or those who can make those changes, and sometimes it's stuff we can change ourselves. But sometimes it requires a policy change. And so I've been able to take that, and based on the relationships that I work on building, and like you say, I say yes to many, many committees because I want them to ask early and often. Because what I tell them is I want to be the registrar of yes, not the registrar of no. And if you ask me and tell me what the problem is, we'll work together to solve the problem. If you come to me with a solution that you've already spent all this time and you're invested in, and then I can't make the computing system do it, I have to tell you no. And and I don't like to do that. So that's really been a mantra of mine, and I've been able to do it partly because I have a really good team, but it's given me that. But I think any registrar, any place, I see heads nodding, you know that stuff. And so if you can develop those relationships and become a partner, then you become the one they go to, because when they have a problem, they want help.
One of the things I did is very intentionally shifting from fully just completely operational to strategic. And that included, I sought out a certificate program in enrollment management from the University of Southern California, and decided that I needed to balance both theory and practice and be able to understand enrollment management theory, and then see how the work I did in my current role and what I could do in the future could help to influence and enrollment management at any campus that I was working. So I think there is being a constant learner of, and keeping an eye on the pulse. And it shows me, just by the fact that you're attending this particular webinar, shows me that that's something that you're wanting to do. But I would encourage you, read the Chronicle every day, read Inside Higher Ed, pay attention to those webinars, and you might have to be a strategic consumer of them, but know what's going on, keep your finger on the pulse, so that when those conversations come to your campus, you can speak knowledgeably about that particular issue. And by doing that, it increases your value on your campus. You are elevated in those conversations. And then as both Brenda and Maria have said, you already have the data and the operational knowledge behind it, you become extremely valuable in the enrollment management space.
So Maria kind of said some magic words for me. So one was the registrar's role in student success and kind of knowing when students are successful and what the barriers are. But the other piece for me is, again, that thought about being the data always being your entry to every conversation, every room, being able to be the expert on things. So all of you talk a little bit more about that student success piece. And, one of the examples that I would think about from the Maria example is it's not just the scenario of you having a good feel for what students are successful, but you also have a really good feel for what the curriculum issues are. What those toxic courses are. Who the faculty member is that is teaching biology that's failing every student. Which courses need to be redesigned. To kind of talk through that and how that also ends up being not just about the student success, but also how that ends up being part of your enrollment management strategy overall. So Maria?
I think a lot of times people think too narrow when they're thinking about student success and enrollment management. For me, it's about that. It's about being in a curriculum meeting and being able to say, this class, the DFWI rate is higher, regardless of who's teaching it. Or this professor, I'm not sure, probably not in a curriculum meeting about a specific professor, but being able to do that and have that, or sitting with the dean about a professor and say, hey, which I've done recently, this class gets a lot of Fs, and this professor, his F rate has gone up. I don't know what's happening there, but there's something. It turns out there was. People think a little too narrow. It's the policy that you move and that you change that is quietly tripping up every single transfer student that no one sees. We just redid our gen ed, which was a miracle. And in the gen ed, I worked really hard when they redid it to have them rethink every single policy related to transfer students. Every single policy became more transfer friendly and more flexible so that we can get more, so that it highlights and helps us as we're working to recruit transfer students and to get transfer students out faster successfully.
Yeah, Tammy, you're kind of right on the nose. That everyone thinks of it of just recruitment, and it's so much bigger. So talk more about that.
Yeah, I think shifting that perspective from enrollment management, because as recruitment, because then that also limits people's thinking of your ability to be a chief enrollment management officer if you're not in charge of recruitment. And so I love what Maria was saying about being able to identify, and you, Jack, the issues in the curriculum. One of the things I would encourage you, however, sometimes with data, it's always backward looking. We need to start seeing how we transform what we have into more predictive modeling, more predictive analytics, and whether that's using the tools that are emerging in the machine learning space, or utilizing resources on your own campus. It could be in your statistics department, utilizing individuals to help you create that predictive look at your data, as opposed to constantly looking looking backward at what did occur. So utilizing that, obviously you have to have that foundation, but then really looking at how are we utilizing this current technology to say, okay, the Amazon model for our students that says students like you have chosen this class or have chosen this pathway and have been successful, and utilizing those holistic characteristics to then look more forward thinking. But I absolutely, it's being able to bring those value added pieces to the conversation. And it may be having a few champions on your campus that you need to educate. So it may be you report to the provost, maybe you need to really educate the provost as to what enrollment management looks like. Or if you've got a VP there, continually educating that person that it's not just recruitment.
I think one of the other things that I think a lot of registrars take for granted, especially being somebody who was in a registrar role and is now in enrollment management in the broader senior enrollment management roles, I had much more access and a much more collegial relationship with faculty, associate deans, and deans when I was registrar than I ever do now. Because, you know, now there's the competition, there's the dynamics, all those kind of things. And again, I'm the guy who gets sent to say no occasionally, where when I was a registrar, I had much more control over what I said yes to. So again, I think there's a lot of bridge building and a lot of opportunities that you have in the registrar role to really leverage those relationships and build some partnerships. So Brenda, talk about what your role, what your kind of experience has been.
Well, I think some of it's a matter of timing. Tammy was talking about, that people tend to think of as recruitment. I think as we are getting closer to the enrollment cliff and everybody is realizing that you can't just keep pouring more students in or finding more students, the idea of student success and looking at what we know about our students that are successful, and rather than just, tweaking the admission standards, which will improve their success, people are much more, and so I think it's the time for the registrar to be acknowledged more and to move up. Some of your stats there at the beginning about the survey that Wendy Kilgore does. I think for admissions people, a lot of them saw that as a natural progression. Registrars haven't always seen it to go into enrollment management, but I think they will be invited more often because, like you say, Jack, they have the relationships on campus. We know the policies, we know where things are. And we've also worked with systems. So Tammy was just talking about that. I mean, it's very important, I think, to look at, there's so much sophomore and so many opportunities now with AI and things to look forward. Registrars, a lot of times we've done rinse and repeat. And it's always been my dream to get kind of to where we are now, where we can say, well, what would happen if we added this new major that needed these new seats because there's a high demand in STEM, or what happens if we move things around, so you can, there's now the ability to look at heat maps and see how things, if you add those classes, or just see where your bottlenecks are and then say, okay, so we need sections. How can we do this? We're teaching hybrid now. What does that look like? How can that leverage your space? And so I think there's a lot of things that we can bring to help people think about how we can help with student success that are maybe not the real traditional, well, what are numbers? How do we bring them in? And then sort of spit them out the other end, but make that path smooth, help with meta majors, help with all of those things that we can leverage. And like you say, think more forward, Tammy. I think that's important with tools that we didn't used to have.
I think one of the other things, you'll hear this a lot at SEM, actually, when you go, I think one of the things you'll hear a lot at SEM now is the other area that folks are starting to think much more frequently of as part of the enrollment management puzzle is the whole advising arm of the university. And often, realistically, the registrar ends up being the conduit between enrollment management and the advising community because of the systems relationships, because of the process relationships, because of some of the staff relationships. So have any of you had that experience where you've really been that conduit to be able to make the connection between the larger enrollment management team and then your advising community?
Yeah, we regularly engage with our advising leadership. And just as an example, the issue on academic standing on our campus has been a challenge for years. And there's the published policy and then what people do with it, and how that affects students who then don't make it in their first choice major, and then how they can transfer to another. And that's been a leaky pipe and a problem for a long time. But we became that conduit, Jack, because some of the advisors were kind of frustrated about their fellow advisors and about how this process was going. And so they started a little ad hoc work group. And because of our relationship, they worked with us, and then we helped them say, okay, let's think through, let's look at the data, let's figure this out. And then this is how you get the policy done. This is how you get the process done. And so we were that bridge then to help that happen. So yeah, very much have done that. And I'm sure the others of you have too.
I actually, until just recently, had advising reporting to me. So, and now it doesn't, because it's reporting directly to the vice president of enrollment management. So, which was a national outgrowth of it reporting to me. And so it makes a lot of sense, right? Because we know the policy and we're the ones who understand how that works. And so it is a natural connection if everyone's open to both sides. It takes a lot of being open and understanding and flexibility and understanding how students are affected.
I think one of the other pieces that I think is really great from the registrar world is I think we end up staying in contact much more often. So I think we're more engaged with each other and much more collegial. So as Tammy was introducing herself, interestingly enough, I feel like I probably could have filled in most of those places in the roles that she had been. I might not have gotten them all in the right order, but I probably would have been able to piece things together. I do feel like we're all engaged in a community a bit more than some others. And so thinking about that and thinking about all of you specifically have been really engaged in ACRO, but specifically engaged in SEM, talk about how the SEM conference has really opened your eyes to other opportunities and really helped you in your roles.
I started attending the SEM conference many years ago, and I think it was part of my natural transition from an associate registrar into a registrar role that also was sitting in the meetings with my other enrollment management colleagues. And I found that those strategic conversations that I had at SEM, I just found them much more edifying, because I had associate registrars that were doing a lot of the operations pieces, and I really needed to shift my focus to those strategic those strategic items. And hearing the conversations that you have at the SEM conference, is completely different than you do at the annual meeting. And one of the things I think that is really enriching about the SEM conference is it appears it's smaller and there's more time for the sessions. The sessions are longer. There's more time for reflection. There's more time for conversation. And so I find that what I come away from the SEM conference is just deeper than I had experienced the years of doing much more operationally focused sessions. And so I also challenged myself when I was first when I was a registrar, first attending SEM conference. I challenged myself to go to sessions that were outside my comfort zone, so that I was not just, sitting in with other registrar folks and trying to decide how we do registrar-y things in the enrollment management space. I really wanted to hear what others were doing, and especially, an area that was a natural pairing was in the financial aid space, because we do have so much overlap with respect to things like SAP and progress toward degree and some of those other things. Really learning more about that space, which I think certainly helped me career-wise in my move when I went to the University of Florida. And so I think being able to just, it might be a little might be a new language a little bit, but spending some time in some of those sessions where you're not as familiar with what's going on, but you can help and challenge those synapses in your brain to make those connections between what you're doing at your institution and what they're talking about in that session.
Maria.
I get as much from at SEM because it's a slightly smaller conference. I get as much from the conversations you have sitting at a table on a break as I do in the sessions. I think last year I brought back a whole list of stuff. My staff told me they were going to stop letting me go because I stopped bringing new things back. But I brought as much from having conversations with others outside of sessions as I did in the sessions itself. And you have a little bit more time to do that at SEM. I also make a point of going to things that I wouldn't normally do, get outside of my comfort zone, expand my knowledge about other things, the entire breadth of SEM, so that when I'm sitting and talking about it, and about it with others on campus, I'm coming from a better position of knowledge and a broader base of knowledge. And I think that's important.
Brenda.
I also think about trying to challenge myself. You heard my career path, and I've been at a large flagship forever. And that's my comfort zone. And so part of me is to see what I can learn from what other types of institutions are doing, rather than to say that would never be applicable. But when it comes to enrollment management and strategy, what's being done at all kinds of institutions can still apply, and you can learn from others that may be very different. And so that's kind of another layer to that, going to things that are outside of my usual zone, or that I would normally go to, is to also challenge myself to see what I can learn from colleagues that work at very different types of institutions.
So, and Brenda, you're actually doing a session at SEM as well. So you're doing one that is completely right in line with the topic today. So your session is retention, how registrars support student retention, which for those of you going to the conference, or know you're going to the conference already, that's going to be on November 7th at 10:30 a.m. So tell us a little bit more about the session you're doing.
Well, it's a lot along the lines of this conversation. And I think it's partly registrars haven't always seen themselves in that picture, or have seen themselves maybe as a service subject matter expert that will be invited to the table when it's the time. And I would like to tell folks that now is the time. And I think you heard us say, get yourself invited there early and often. And then also share a few, a little bit in the weeds, a few practical sort of things we've done to help people realize that it's not, you need to learn a lot about thinking strategically, and that then how do you tie that back to actual actions or things that you work on. One thing, for instance, I talk about is communication. Every registrar's office is constantly communicating with students, right? And we hired a new communications. Anyway, we got this whole new communication structure at the university, and the new person had come from the outside, and she went and worked with student affairs and started sending out memos thinking that, well, student affairs knew everything about students, and had not talked to admissions, financial aid, registrar, cashiers, and was sending out stuff that was utterly wrong. So we had some chats, we developed relationships, and they thought, I'm like, I'm not wedded to sitting. I know our messages are ugly and aren't, we're not the designers, but we're happy to partner with you. We just want to be sure it's accurate. And so that was like one of those things that came out that's so important to our students. They get overwhelmed with stuff, but making sure they get the right information and all that. But anyway, so that's just like an example, but we'll talk some about the strategy, getting yourself invited, and then a little bit in the practical things, so it can kind of get some juices going.
And on that practical vein, Maria, yours is absolutely in that practical wheelhouse. So it is in the registrar world, if there was whatever a registrar world, and it's how you can reimagine registration holds as part of your retention strategy. So talk again, also on the 7th at 3:30. So you could literally go to both of those sessions if you're at the SEM meeting. So Maria, tell us a little bit more about that session. You're on mute.
There you go. That always helps. I would say first that this was in part inspired by by conversations that were had at a round table last year at SEM. There was a registrar roundtable, and there was a broad conversation, and a little comment by someone there, something I brought back to help fix an issue. Coming out of COVID, it seems like the number of students who have business office holds, who are having challenges paying, all of that is increasing, but we need to keep them. And we were running into a situation where students fix one issue, all the classes are closed. Then they're more likely to just not register because they can't get what they want anyway. And which leads to losing the student anyway after you work to get the hold closed. We rethought the whole process and moved where the holds trigger. So they're not really holds in the same way anymore. And it's made a big difference in terms of more revenue coming in and increasing student success, retention. So.
And Tammy, I hate to break it to you and Brenda, but the two of you are in competition with each other at 10:30 on the 7th. So you really got to sell this. Tammy's session is really about reimagining the course schedule and how that can impact enrollment management and retention. Tammy.
Thank you. So yes, I loved when Brenda talked about, or maybe Jack talked about, the lather, rinse, repeat, how we kind of just do things again and again and again in the registrar world. But this section actually was an outcropping of some consulting work that Maureen Carver and I have been doing with different schools who are looking at trying to reach different populations of students, also looking to balance this new world of different modalities and really utilizing the class schedule as the enrollment management tool. So how are we looking at the times that our learners want to take courses? How are you balancing faculty and student preferences with respect to modality, times? Sometimes I say that faculty are just grown-up students, in that they still want between 10 and 3 or 10 and 2 as far as their teaching assignments go. And so how do you challenge that in a way that helps you to expand the offerings? Or as we're getting into the areas of things like micro-credentials and the time it takes to achieve that micro-credential or that learning outcome, how are we adjusting our course schedule to reflect the needs of and what's also our competitors are doing, whether it be in private industry or in other sectors of higher education, in providing those either boot camps or micros in a way that's much more conducive to what the learner needs, as opposed to what the traditional academic calendar has been for many, many years. And so how do we as registrars adjust to that? How do we influence the conversation? How do we appropriately guide innovation? So we'll throw out some topics during this session, but it'll also be a roundtable. So we're expecting folks to be able to come and share and ask questions of each other. So that's something we're really excited about.
So Tammy is also one of our coaches for the SEM team experience. And so if you've never been to SEM before, or even if, frankly, if you have been to SEM before, you always hear about this mysterious teams experience. But if you've never been part of it, you kind of say, what is that? Who are these folks that are going off in the other room? One of the things that ACRO offers that is a really phenomenal experience for the SEM conference is specifically if you have 4 or more attendees from the same institution, we will give you the offer of working with essentially a coach. And so someone usually from our consulting team or somebody who's a really seasoned enrollment manager within the ACRO portfolio will work with you and your institution and all the attendees that are there and talk through some opportunities. So Tammy, talk a little bit more about how that works, what some of the benefits of that been, and some of the experience. I think you've actually probably been on both sides of that, if I remember right.
I have been on both sides of it. The team and the coaching, that is one of the most exciting things about SEM, because it really, the conversations that you have away from your campus with individuals who are interested, including faculty. We always encourage some faculty members to attend with these teams. And so being able to have those conversations and stepping aside, you'll have a session, but then you have time for processing and questioning. And as a coach, it's my opportunity to either help guide that discussion, help to reflect back what they may have heard, to connect them either with other sessions that might be going on, with other resources that might be, whether it's part of the ACRO library or other individuals at different schools who are doing things that are similar or have the similar needs. It's my job to help connect those individuals, not just at the conference, but I try to maintain that relationship after the conference and provide resources to those individuals. And so if you have the opportunity to bring a team, I would encourage you to sign up for coaching, because it's not formal. We don't do an evaluation, and you're not graded on how well your team comes together and do you have a SEM plan at the end of the meeting. It's really just an opportunity to have some additional guidance through the conference itself, but also then the ability to expand the network of resources that you might have during the conference and after.
And when I first moved into this role, I had a large group that went to the conference with me, and my Stan Henderson was our coach. So somebody who I literally have known for 30 years and actually used to literally sit in my seat. This used to be his office I'm standing in. And so it was really kind of fun to be able to talk to him about an institution he had been at 20 years ago, how we've changed, what our struggles are, what are the things we're trying to solve. But one of the things that was really valuable for me and my team was it was an opportunity to have somebody who's really familiar with the portfolio of the ACRO SEM conference and to be able to say, here's the sessions or the instructors that you will really get something out of. So it could be a case, and there were specific examples of this where he would say, go to Tammy's session, for example. It may not be something that you're worried about, but your folks are going to get a lot out of Tammy, and they're going to absolutely have a value in being exposed to that presenter. And each day there's time set aside for the teams to be able to meet as a group with the coach. And again, it's an opportunity for you to reflect on your day, talk about what you learned, talk about new ideas and some things that you're maybe trying to solve now that when you walked into the conference, you weren't even thinking about. And it's a really good opportunity to be connected to other resources within ACRO, other resources nationally, sometimes other consulting resources, but also publications and other pieces too. So again, having somebody that's done this for a really long time, is really knowledgeable, and is able to make those connections is really valuable. So in I want to give folks a couple of moments to reflect. So within the folks that are on the panel, you answer a couple of things for me. So one, other than your own session, what is the session or the type of session that you're most looking forward to at the SEM conference? And for folks that are different points in their career in enrollment management or in registrar world, what are some other professional development things that you would recommend that they take advantage of? So Brenda.
So I'm looking forward to spending some time, actually, as much the sessions is what Maria was saying, is to hit people up around and talk with them about what their latest experiences are. And particularly, I am interested in what's going on with AI and how folks may be leveraging that. We've tried a chat bot here at the university. It did not go well, but I think there are newer, better versions out there, and I want to find out what it can do not only in customer service, but in strategic planning.
Maria.
I'm looking forward to like Tammy said in the thing, the presidential panel should be really interesting with an interesting perspective on what's happening out there. Same thing with the affirmative action one. Part of what I get out of STEM is that sense of what's going to be happening, what's happening in the world, to give a sense of where are we in that big picture. So there is that. I'm looking forward to some good conversations in between sessions. Also looking at how offices work together to come up with a new kind of solution to something, sessions that focus in that kind of a direction.
And I let Brenda off the hook on this one, but I'll go back to her. So the other thing was, Maria, is what's the other professional development things or the other professional development things within our in ACRO that you really encourage folks to get involved in?
I do as many webinars as possible that fit in my schedule. I use the recordings too. I read a lot inside higher ed, Chronicle. I read the research journals also to see what's happening in student success. Present. I think it's important to just, take a jump. Everyone's doing something that they could probably present on if you think about it. So get involved either in your regional or in ACRO overall. I think the value you get out of that cannot be replaced.
So Brenda, I'm going back to you as a board member. What do you recommend for involvement and for professional development?
I think one of the easy entry points is the collectives that we have about every month now. If you've got a topic, even if you don't know who can speak, if you can throw it out there for us to get together and have these kind of discussion sessions, I think that's a very nice new sort of entry point that doesn't take a huge time commitment if you're feeling really crushed on time. The other thing is to use the resources. I think people don't know everything ACRO really has to offer right now. And ACRO is working very hard, especially as we anticipate a growth in our number of members, that we need to meet people where they are. So there is a plethora. If you like blogs, or you like book clubs, or you like webinars and listening to those things, or if you like serving on committees, I mean, there's a little bit of something for everybody. So I really encourage you to go out, explore the website, see what resources are there. And sometimes I've heard from folks it's intimidating to maybe join a committee or to do something. We are all peers. This is not an intimidating group at all. And I hope if you've gotten nothing else out of what we've talked about today is that we are friendly, warm colleagues, and that's part of why I've stayed in higher education. So even if you see a committee and say, hey, I want to be on it, but I don't know what that means. I've never done a committee at the national level. Do not be intimidated. You'll be led through it.
Tammy.
Yeah, so what I always look forward to, I put the presidential panel in the chat, but all the plenaries. Oftentimes some people think that the plenary, that's just a chance to go put your feet up somewhere or whatever. I would really encourage you to the plenaries at SEM are unlike any other. And I really encourage you to attend the plenaries. They're always enriching. I also would encourage you to take a look at, don't discount sessions. I don't know if we have any of our Canadian colleagues on this webinar, but don't discount sessions that might be, if you're from the States, presented by a colleague from Canada. Even though there might be a little different lexicon, not colleges, but faculties, and you might have to translate a little bit. I think there's a lot that could be gained from that. But do be a good consumer of the size and type of institution and how applicable that information might be to your institution. If you're a small liberal arts college, is something that's presented by a large public institution that has lots of resources going to be as helpful for you as another session. So those are just some ways to navigate the SEM conference itself. As far as other professional opportunities, the SEM EP program, it is a fabulous program where you get a chance to really see what's behind becoming an enrollment professional in the SEM world. So if you have an opportunity, that's a larger opportunity, but there's also courses that are available out there. Register for a course that's offered through ACRO. Maybe do one just introduction to SEM and see how much you like it. And then decide maybe you want to go into the SEM EP program. But there'll be folks there at the conference who will talk specifically about the SEM EP certificate program through ACRO. If you're at all interested in progressing in this field and becoming someone like Brenda or Jack or Maria in these areas, think about that program.
Yeah, a couple of other ACRO specific plugs. Absolutely look into the Ascend program, look into the Women's Leads program, the Leadership Institute. Those are both newer programs, ones that not everybody knows about, and those are absolutely phenomenal. Tammy and I both led things for Ascend and just incredible. As far as sessions, a couple that I'll call out, and again, this is to get you more thinking about things than just the speaker. But one of the things that we're doing this year at the beginning, so I'll talk about one at the beginning and one at the end. At the beginning, one of the pre-conference workshops this year is sponsored by the American Indian Council. And it's a roundtable among leaders within those institutions about what their issues are. Kind of goes back to Tammy's conversation earlier about going to things that are outside of your comfort zone or outside of your wheelhouse. That's one that I frequently have gone to HBCU sessions and American Indian Council sessions before, because from a really big, always being at a really big public institution, it gave me an opportunity to think about topics that, again, I may take back and put into place a completely different way than they talked about it in that session. But it absolutely allowed me to think about issues that I may not have thought about otherwise. And then the closing speaker is going to be absolutely phenomenal. So it's Victoria DeFrancesco Soto, and it's going to be really about essentially a warning bell almost to the political landscape that we're in right now. And I think it's going to be a really great kind of energizing conversation, especially after the president's panel and the conversation earlier in the week on affirmative action. It's really going to be about not just where are we headed nationally, but also thinking about all of the state and regional politics that we're dealing with that are impacting higher education and the value, responding to the value of higher education. So again, I think what you'll see is a really phenomenal full package of a SEM conference this year. So So I want to again thank all of our panelists and thank all of you for being here today. I'm hoping that we all get a chance to see you at the SEM conference, and all of the panelists I'm sure will welcome questions if you have any follow-up, or if something that we talked about today triggered something inspirational. So don't hesitate to reach out, and hopefully we will see you all in Seattle. Thanks, everyone.